Okay, so my name is Janelle Castro. It is March 27th, 2021, and our poem of the day is Lady Lazarus by Sylvia Plath. So we get in our brief biography of the author. This is a little bit important before you get into a poem because you really want to know what was going on with that person or around that, especially like historical context. In that time period, it could really affect a writer's way of writing, how they write, when they write, what they write about. It could make things a lot more clearer when we're trying to analyze a poem, a short story, anything. So, brief biography. Sylvia Plath was born on October 27th in Boston, Massachusetts, 1932. Unfortunately, her father passed away when she was 8 due to diabetes. And from age 11, she had been writing. So, she had been writing since she was fairly young, as we can see. She won a scholarship in attendance with college, so she was very intelligent. But sadly, while she was there, she attempted suicide by overdose, eventually recovering and returning to complete her degree. So, this wasn't one of her only suicide attempts. She had multiple. In 1962, she had driven her car into a river, which she admitted to being an attempt at suicide, and also, unfortunately, she died as a result of a suicide by putting her head in her oven and then she passed of carbon monoxide poisoning. So it's a little gruesome. I should have put a trigger warning there, but all of this is really important when we get into the bulk of the poem. So I really wanted to go over that. And then historical context. Um Again, this is important because honestly, anything that was going on in that time period could have affected the way the writer wanted to write her piece. So the poem was published in 1965. I believe it was written a little bit before that, so I put key events in the years before the publication date. So in 1963, the Civil Rights March of Washington happened, the the Equal Pay Act happened, so that was pretty big in our history, and the Civil Rights Act was passed. So those are pretty big historical things that happened in the time period that this was released, and it could help us later. So let's keep going. This is a TP cast. Don't read it yet. I just kind of want to introduce this to you before I start reading the poem so you can start thinking about these things. So, a TP cast is the title, paraphrase, connotation, attitude, shift, title revisited, and theme. So, what does that mean for you? Well, while I get into the poem, first, right now, for a couple 5 seconds, I want you to think about the title, Lady Lazarus. So, What does that mean to you? What do you think could come of the poem with that name? So, if you feel like Lazarus has any sort of connection, if you feel like there's nothing really to go off, what do you think about the title when you first see it? And then we have to paraphrase, but you won't need to do that while I get into the poem. What I do want you to think about is the connotation. So, word choice, poetic devices, anything that you see, it's good to just kind of keep on track what you see. If you find metaphors, allusions, imagery, kind of like the stuff that I put on here, kind of take a mental note, write it down, make sure that you understand those terms. And then attitude, so tone, try to think of the tone, what's going on. Shift, try to see where you see a shift. I'll read it with stops, everything, try to listen, analyze. The poem will also be on screen. Title revisited. So when I'm done reading the poem, kind of think about the title again, see if it makes any sense. And the theme. So these are all kind of things you want to think about. Even if you're not reading a poem, it could be a short story, anything along those lines. But this is really going to help you understand what's really going on because this is also one of those poems that you can't just look at it and understand. This is something that you really need to read deep into. So try to think about these things right here. You can see them: title, paraphrase, connotation, diction, attitude, tone, shift, theme. Think of all those things while we're going through the poem. And now we will move on to introducing the poem. So this is Lady Lazarus by Sylvia Plath. I have done it again. 1 year in every 10, I manage it. A sort of walking miracle. My skin bright as a Nazi lampshade, my right foot a paperweight, my face a featureless fine Jew linen. Peel off my napkin, oh my enemy, do I terrify? The nose, the eye pits, the full set of teeth, the sour breath will vanish in a day. Soon, soon the flesh the grave cave ate will be at home on me, and I am a smiling woman. I am only 30, and like the cat, I have 9 times to die. This is number 3. What a trash to annihilate each decade. What a million filaments the peanut crunching crowd shoves in to see them. Unwrap me hand and foot. The big striptease, gentlemen, ladies, these are my hands, my knees. I may be skin and bone. Nevertheless, I am the same identical woman. The first time it happened, I was 10. It was an accident. The second time, I meant to last it out, to not come back at all. I rocked shut. As a seashell, they had to call and pick the worms off me like sticky pearls. Dying is an art like everything else. I do it exceptionally well. I do it so it feels like hell. I do it so it feels real. I guess you could say I have a call. It's easy enough to do it in a cell. It's easy enough to do it and stay put. It's the theatrical. Come back in broad daylight to the same place, the same face, the same brute, amused shout. A miracle that knocks me out. There is a charge for the eyeing of my scars. There is a charge for the hearing of my heart. It really goes. And there is a charge, a very large charge, for a word or a touch or a bit of blood or a piece of my hair or my clothes. So, here, doctor. So here, enemy, I am your opus, I am your valuable, the pure gold baby that melts to a shriek. I turn and burn. Do not think I underestimate your great concern. Ash, ash, you poke and stir, flesh, bone, there is nothing there. A cake of soap, a wedding ring, a gold filling. Hear God, hear Lucifer, beware, beware, out of the ash I rise with my red hair, and I eat men like air. So that's the end. As you can see, there's a little bit to unpack here. I sure hope you were reading along and kind of thinking about the things that we saw in the TP cast. So before I show you that, I do want to talk about the poem a little bit. So I want you to think about what was the first impression you had. Like I told you, think about the title. So I want you to think about what the first impression you had of it was and what your impression of it now is. Now that we've gotten through it and read it, it's a generally long poem, I would say. I mean, I've read longer, but it's a lot, especially with a writer like Sylvia. So, first I want to point out she goes, the first line of the poem, I have done it again. 1 year in every 10, I manage it. So here it's the first line, obviously, we're a little bit confused, but then she goes on to say, a couple stanzas later, I am a smiling woman. I am only 30, and like the cat, I have 9 times to die. So then she goes, this is number 3, what a trash to annihilate each decade. So we can assume that something is going on between each decade, because obviously this is a hyperbole. You cannot annihilate time, you cannot erase time. So there's something going on here. And we really see that where it says, and like the cat, I have 9 times to die. She goes on to say, before any of these lines, which these connect soon and we'll talk about it in a bit, she goes, a paperweight, my face a featureless fine Jew linen. Peel off the napkin. Oh, my enemy, do I terrify? The nose, the eye pits, the full set of teeth. So this is obviously her saying, I feel like this is really like, peel off my skin. Am I scary to you? So it's almost like she's trying to get back at somebody. But then she says, soon, the flesh the grave cave ate will be at home on me. So this is where a lot of it gets a little convoluted, but I did say in my TP cast, which will go there now, just off the title, it can be assumed that the poem may have biblical connections made obvious by the blatant use of the name Lazarus. This allusion refers to the man named Lazarus who had been resurrected by Jesus in the New Testament. This could lead to a lot of speculation of what the poem may be about, but the most prominent theme that seems to stick out after analyzing the title is the act of resurrection. May it be physically or mentally, this idea of the dead coming back to life should be expected getting into the poem. So, see, that's why I wanted you guys to think about the title, because when you think about what the title may be hinting at, it makes things easier to understand. I have done it again 1 year in every 10 I manage it. And she talks about being dead and having 30 lives, and this is her third life. So, at this point, especially with her sad personal historical background, it can be assumed that she is talking about her suicide attempts. Um, it gets a little dark after this, but that's why I wanted you guys to think about the title, because things like this are really important when it comes to literature. And now that we've talked about the 3 years out of 10, the 30, the repeating threes, I want everyone to look at the poem and see if they notice anything about the structure. Give you a couple seconds. So every stanza in this poem is 3 lines. So obviously this was not an accident. This is her alluding to her 3 lives. And I thought that was very interesting. I feel like it really helps put the poem together. It's pretty genius. At first, when I looked at it, I had to read it a couple times to understand. I did not notice anything about the form. I didn't even see rhyme scheme the first time I read it. This is definitely something you have to read and read again. So I'm going to read it again a little bit faster this time, just kind of try and get you guys to understand it, and then we'll go into a deeper analysis. TP cast, I'll show you how to do a TP cast, I'll show you how to do an ace, and then we'll have a little quiz. So I have done it again. 1 year in every 10 I manage it, a sort of walking miracle, my skin bright as a Nazi lampshade, my right foot a paperweight, my face a featureless fine Jew linen. Remember, you want to remember the Nazi lampshade and the fine Jew linen. Everything that alludes to things in history like that, you really want to keep in the back of your mind. Peel off my napkin, oh my enemy, do I terrify. The nose that I pits the full set of teeth. So this is referring to her skull. The sour breath of a dead person will vanish in a day. Soon the flesh the grave cave ate will be at home on me. So that's her skin coming back to her. That's her essentially being rebirthed or resurrected. I am a smiling woman. I am only 30, and like the cat, I have 9 times to die. So she does it. This is number 3, so this is her 3rd time. What a trash to annihilate each decade. So it's almost like it's a whole new person. But then she goes on to say, what a million filaments the peanut crunching crowd shoves into sea. Also, that really suggests that people talk about her. They're like, oh, she tried to kill herself. Let's see what she does next. She's crazy. But besides that, you would think, oh, annihilate each decade, annihilating her personality from each decade, becoming a new person. Then she says, them wrap me hand and foot, the big strip tease, ladies and gentlemen, these are my hands, my knees, I may be skin and bone, nevertheless, I am the same identical woman. So this could mean a couple things. It's a little bit hard to understand, almost as if she is the same woman physically but not spiritually. And I would assume that that would be the case, because of course after something so gruesome as suicide, so sad as suicide, you would not be the same after coming back from a failed attempt, especially multiple if this has happened in multiple years of her life. The second time, I meant it to last out and not come back at all. I rocked shut as a seashell. They had to call and call and pick the worms off me like sticky pearls. When I read this line, and pick the worms off me like sticky pearls, I immediately thought of maggots. Sticky pearls, they're white maggots. So this is her talking about her being dead again. Dying is an art. Like everything else, I do it exceptionally well. I do it so it feels like hell. I do it so it feels real. I guess you could say I have a call. This is very interesting because now she's really obviously when you see this poem, you would not think, wow, a sane person wrote this. This is definitely someone with underlying mental health issues. So now we see that she really thinks that dying is an art. And I also feel like this comes from people putting on her on almost on display and watching her like what a million filaments the peanut crunching crowd shoves into sea. So I feel like that it's almost like she's putting on a show. It's an art to her. Come back in broad day to the same place, the same face, the same brute amused shout. A miracle. Again, this is her telling us this is not the first time that it has happened. And then she says, there's a charge for eyeing my scars, there's a charge for the hearing of my heart. It really goes, and there was a charge, a very large charge, for a word or a touch or a bit of blood or a piece of my hair or my clothes. So here, doctor, here, enemy. The doctors are her enemies. This is her saying, I did not want you to bring me back. She doesn't want to keep hearing this a miracle scream. For everyone else, to her, this is a selfish act. People saving her life is a selfish act. I am your opus, I am your valuable, the pure gold baby that melts to a shriek. I turn and burn. Do not think that I underestimate your great concern. Ash, ash. You poke and stir flesh bone, there is nothing there. A cake of soap, a wedding ring, a gold filling. There is a lot there too. So this to me, immediately when I had first read it, I already knew. She had set herself on fire. And of course, in the ashes of her flesh and bone, none of that was there. It was her soap. So she set herself on fire in her shower, maybe in her kitchen. A wedding ring, a gold filling. So the gold filling is kind of important here because earlier she mentions Nazi lampshades, Jew linen, you know, Nazi Jews, Holocaust. There's a little bit of Holocaust allusions going on right here, and I see that with the gold filling because it's very common knowledge that the Jews during the Holocaust, the Nazis would take out their gold teeth fillings. So that's what she's talking about, her gold filling in her tooth. And out of the ash I will rise with my red hair and eat men like air. So obviously she has some sort of animosity towards the men, especially if she's saying, for the eyeing of my scars there is a charge. Um, Peel off the napkin, oh my enemy, do I terrify? She definitely has some sort of animosity for the males here, and it would also make sense because let's go back to our historical context. A lot of stuff was going on in this time period, and the Equal Pay Act was done, the Civil Rights Act, everything about that, and that was earlier on in time when men were a little bit less when things were a little bit less equal towards women, and obviously this woman was an intelligent woman, so I could see how that could be reflected in the poem. And this is another reason why looking at the historics really helps when you're trying to understand what the author was writing about. So now let's look at our TP cast. I read you the title and now paraphrase. So when you paraphrase, you want to make sure that your paraphrase is about the same or exactly the same amount of lines as your poem. And it's going to make everything so much easier for you to understand. I'll read a little bit of my paraphrase. I'm not going to read all of it because I did an in-depth reading line by line of the poem, but I did it again. Once every decade, I find myself repeating this action. I seem to be a walking anomaly. My right foot weighing me down like an anchor, skin as thin, as weak, as light as a lampshade, my skin featureless, fine Jewish fabric. Peel my skin from my bones. Do I terrify you? The ghastly sight of a decaying body's skull, the potent odor, but I won't stay like this. My flesh that decayed where I lied would return to my body. I wear a smile. I'm only 30, but like a cat, I have 9 lives. So you see, when you really think about each line and simplify it down, the paraphrasing will really help you try to analyze the poem. So that's the first two, TP, title, paraphrase. Now we're going to go on to connotation. So I didn't put every single literary device that I saw because I went into the poem with you guys, but here are some. The allusions. So Lady Lazarus, the biblical meaning. You see, I saw that in the title, and we were right. Lazarus, the rebirth is a huge thing in this poem. She talks about it happening 3 times, and of course the allusions to the Nazis, everything going on, which that was a little bit before that. So we're gonna. It doesn't really like you know. I feel like this wasn't her time period when the Holocaust was happening, but there were things going on like the illusions. It's very clear. The gold tooth, the Jew linen, the Nazi lampshade. Like there's a clear Jewish connection here. And then there are metaphors, like a sort of walking miracle. My skin bright as a Nazi lampshade. Another thing that connects to the gold tooth illusion, bright as a Nazi lampshade. That could be simile, imagery. A cake of soap, a wedding ring, a gold filling, do I terrify? The nose, the eyes, the pits, set full of teeth. Ash, ash, you poke and stir, flesh, bone, there is nothing there. Those are only 3 quotes that really show us the imagery that Plath had put into this poem. And then another simile right here. Pick the worms off me like sticky pearls. And again, I said, to me, I felt like she was talking about maggots. So that just makes a lot more sense. Again, you can interpret it however you like, but to me that just makes the most sense. And then next we have attitude, which is almost like a tone. So the tone here is a mix of unpleasantness, as this piece does touch on death, suicide, rebirth, many triggering topics. When I read it, the first word that I personally thought of was melancholy, anguish, mentally ill, traumatized. um it's a lot to unpack, like I said in the beginning. And then shift. So I wanted to point out the first shift I saw, which we can look at it on the poem. So the first shift I saw, soon, soon, the flesh, the grave cave A will be at home on me. I am a smiling woman. So here it's just like, oh, I do it every all the time again. A miracle. We kind of we start building up with the Nazi lampshade, featureless fine Jew linen, peel off my, and then it starts slowly rising up. Peel off the napkin, do I terrify? The nose, the eyes pits, the full set of teeth. And here is when we really begin to understand, where we see the first shift. Soon the flesh the grave cave ate will be at home on me. See, this makes us understand a lot, because when you connect the name Lazarus to what she's talking about, it makes an abundance of sense that she is talking about rebirth. So now we're going to go back to the title. What did we see in the title where we write about it? I don't know what you guys, I want you guys to think about what you thought the title was going to be. What I put for my title revisited was, as shown through the poem's devices and analysis, assuming Lazarus in the title as a biblical reference was correct, shown by her ultimately dying and being reborn, and not only once, but multiple times. Then we can get to our theme. One of the most prominent themes is the depression and willingness to commit suicide, burdening on someone's back, but their hate may keep them alive, even if not physically. And I want you guys to remember this last line. Out of the ash, I will rise with my red hair, and I eat men like air. This is her almost looking for revenge. And now, so wait, before we move on, this is the TP cast. I want you guys to remember this. Title, paraphrase, connotation, attitude, shift, title revisited, and theme. This is going to help you a lot. Don't forget it. TP cast with 2 T's at the end. And now theme statement. So a theme statement is not one word. I cannot stress this enough. A theme statement is not one word. In Sylvia Plath's Lady Lazarus, death and rebirth are exceptionally prominent throughout the piece, speaking of her various suicide attempts and her feeling that death and suicide is an art and that she's an artist. She does say that throughout the poem. She does it exceptionally well. She does it so it feels like hell, so it feels real. I wanted you guys to remember most of the stuff. That's why I read it more than once. And that is a big part. She says she does it exceptionally well. And then she commits a death almost like putting on a show for everyone else to watch. Because she knows that people gossip about her suicide attempts, her mental health. Back then, people were a lot more, I feel like, mean and rude, especially towards women. There's a lot of stuff going on in that time period. So ace. An ace is assertion, evidence, and commentary. So when you're building your ace, you want to put in your assertion. Author Sylvia Plath uses imagery in her words to establish her belief that suicide attempt and death itself is an art. So then that is our assertion. She uses imagery in her words to establish her belief that suicide attempts and death itself is an art. We want to put in our evidence. So we have our lines here. Starting from line, dying is an art. Like everything else, I do it exceptionally well. This quote is purely Plath displaying her views on death, but later in the piece she goes on to say, that melts to a shriek, I turn and burn, do not think I underestimate your great concern. Ash, ash, you poke and stir flesh bone, there is nothing there. A cake of soap, a wedding ring, a gold filling. And that's the crazy imagery that she's showing us, that we're looking for, that she's establishing. She's putting that in the piece for a purpose, to show how she's feeling, her mental health. That is a big part of the whole piece, her whole life. And when you want to put your commentary, always tie your assertion to your commentary, or it will be messy. It's not going to make sense. There's going to be loose ends. Ace number 2. Sylvia Plath uses religious allusions to clarify her standing on her situation. And then again at the end, when we put in our commentary, not only does the allusion give us a clue to her possible mental health, which we have already established is a huge thing when trying to understand this, but it connects to the theme as the story of Lazarus, about a man getting resurrected by Jesus. Always, 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 always connect your evidence, your assertion, and your commentary. Everything has to be on the same page. Again, the author Sylvia Plath uses hyperboles to accentuate her theme of death and despair and hate. This assists in developing the theme of the story because it is another way of saying her old selves from those past lives are dead, killed, and she's a new person but is in the same body, almost like separate souls, just using the same vessel. You always want to connect you always want to connect your assertion and your commentary. It's going to help you out so much. If you're writing something for a class, if you're trying to understand something, connect your assertion to your commentary and make sure your evidence is solid. And here's our quiz. So if you could pause now, I'll give you a couple seconds to do that. When you're done, unpause the video and I will read you what the answers are. Hi, so I'm guessing you're back from taking the quiz. So what does TPCAST stand for? I said it a million times and I'm hoping that you would remember, and I'm going to put it up for you again. TPCAST. Title, paraphrase, connotation, attitude, shift, title revisited, and theme. Get that in your head. Title, paraphrase, connotation, attitude, tone. No, not tone. Well, you have to think about the tone, but that goes with shift. Title, paraphrase, connotation, diction, attitude, shift, title revisited, and theme. These things will help you. You have to think about these things when you're reading a poem. What were 2 major themes mentioned in the analysis? So there you could have mentioned a couple. The really 2 big ones is death and rebirth, suicide, anything like that. What would have worked? How would you describe the tone of this piece in your own words? So if you use anything along the lines of melancholic, anguish, sad, hatred, burning, depression, as long as you didn't put anything about the opposite of that, like happy, fun, you understand what's going on. True or false? The author's poem structure was directly linear with the author's years and suicide attempts. That is true. Each stanza had 3 lines in it. And then name 3 poetic devices. I had 4 on my TPCast. There are way more in the poem, some that I couldn't even find because I'm not that advanced. But name 3 poetic devices. There was a simile, hyperbole, metaphors, allusions, all of that was in there. And here is our works cited. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you loved the lesson. I hope it was easy to understand, quick. You got to remember your ACE and your TPCast. Thank you so much, and goodbye.